it'll, there we go. So the gist. So this church, we'll call it First Church. Is situated on the kind of first tier outside of the urban core, first tier suburbs. And it's on a main kind of principal road out of the downtown area. As the recently the homeless population has started kind of leaving the downtown core and filtering out into the suburbs. And a lot of that is due to the guys and girls that are flying a sign or panhandling. They are finding that they make on average $250 a day by putting a sign up in certain suburban intersections. So the homeless population's kind of going out because they're also kind of getting more ignored in the urban core, and with regentrification, they're trying to push homeless people out of some of those regentrified areas downtown. So this church, First Church, is finding that they've had some contact with people that'll come by the church and ask for money or ask for handouts, that kind of thing. But now they're starting to find people that are feeling the freedom to put up a tent or sleep in certain parts of the property that are sheltered, either behind bushes or fences or walls. And so the church is trying to, it's caused a rift where people have different ideas or approaches. So the co-pastors have been there for about 3 years, and they're really starting to preach about love and love your neighbor, love neighbor, a lot of stuff that kind of resonates with this class on how do we live out our theology. And so as this situation started developing, this guy started kind of setting up camp on the property, and the pastors are thinking, oh, wow, this is a great opportunity that we could show love to our neighbors, and we could really live this out. And so, but on the other side, the board and certain members of the board, one in particular, is he's the insurance agent for the church's insurance. And so he sees a liability and sees all the reasons why we need to call the police and get this guy off our property. So as you know, as each group kind of has their shares their side of the story, they kind of get entrenched on what should the approach be. This is also during winter, and there's some really cold snaps going on, and so it seemed even more heartless to try and push this guy out, call him Bill, to move on. So naming it, the homeless guy is sleeping on the property and trying to detect on what to do. The pastors are preaching on love. The board wants to call the cops, and then Bill's staying there either way. The transformation, it was that both groups are getting more entrenched in their sides, and actually nothing happened. So the transformation was that the solution did not just resolve itself. We did not love the guy to a better situation, and the cops were not called. And so that produced this even further entrenched situation. So I guess I already said that. So during the discussions, and some of the church was trying to figure out, okay, do we provide meals? Do we build showers in our church? How do we love them more directly? How do we provide for some of their needs? So all of those were questions and suggestions that everybody was trying to figure out as they were getting more entrenched on, we need to call the cops, or we need to love these people as our neighbors. I just calling it before I put it in there. So Bill, as the church started rethinking and renaming, kind of coming back to Naming the problem after their first go around didn't seem to work or get them anywhere. Especially the board member who's the insurance agent is getting more impatient and more upset. And so things are about to come to a head. So in the reflecting time, the pastors were then wanting to reflect and kind of, okay, they realized that this wasn't working. So the district where this first church is, this district has a shelter or rescue mission that's on the district that the district supports, and that this local church helps contribute to monthly. And so they called the director, and the director came in and decided to or agreed to help give an expert response of, this is a rescue mission and this is what they deal with on a regular basis. So during the explanation and the presentation, this expert, the director of this mission, lays out some of the basis and some of the kind of interactions and normal interactions with homelessness and people that are experiencing homelessness. As he's laying that out, he's touching on how we need to love them. We need to build relationship with people that are experiencing homelessness. And so during this meeting, the pastor's kind of feeling affirmed and, well, I had the right approach and I had the godly approach. And then throughout the meeting, the director was saying, well, at our rescue mission, we don't let people stay on our property in our doorways. They either have to come in or they have to move on. So then the other camp was getting even more, justified of, well, yeah, see, the expert said that we are right to kick them off. Throughout this meeting, and it was about a probably 2.5 hour meeting, that the expert and the pastor and the concerned people were in, kind of came to the conclusion of, we need to help them move on, but we need to do so in relationship. So we can't just kick them out. We need to do so after we get to know them, hear their story, and talk to them, and then ask them to move on. So through that meeting and further discussions on how to move forward with the situation, the church, the pastor, and the people that wanted to just call the cops agreed to developing guidelines of what does it look like to have, what is our plan as a church, so that we're unified in our response. We're showing tough love, but through love and relationship, not just through the iron fist. So they were able to agree that, no, we don't want to let anybody sleep on our property. And once we find them, we need to ask them to leave, as well as we need to, invite them to coffee or take them to lunch and say, hey, what's your name? What's your story? And build a relationship with them. So and then as they go, the other piece with this expert was, how do we build the bridge between this local church and the homeless shelter that deals with this on a regular basis? And if they're the experts in this, then how do we connect the church that's dealing with homelessness to the experts that are trained and equipped to help these people either recover or wait until they're ready to accept help and be in a place where they can't be helped. So that's kind of the end of my presentation there. I guess that was the short version. So questions, thoughts, feedback, criticisms?
So, and this church had never had any interactions with the homeless before, like
their only interactions were because they were one of the closer churches to the rescue mission. Whenever there were a lot of people that worked at the rescue mission that went to church there, and they would bring guys that are in their program to church. And so it was kind of a controlled, it wasn't just,
Like tokenized almost.
yeah, they weren't asking the church for anything. And so I think that's the harder part is how are you on the front lines and engaging with people before they're ready for help and building relationship with guys or people that are needing help. You know, that when they're already in the program, you can kind of justify it by saying, hey, you know, they're getting help or they're on the road to recovery, but dealing with people beforehand can get messy.
Did you might have said this. I mean, some people choose to be homeless. It's just like the lifestyle a bit more. I mean, it's just people do things that make sense to them. Did I mean obviously you? So you, I mean, it sounds like you've reflected on when they're ready. That's when we should. That's when like we can't just come on, get in the car, let's go to the rescue mission. It's like
Yeah.
um, was that conversation? I mean, I guess what did the conversation look like with the homeless person?
Part of the training and the conversation with the director of the mission was that, one, you can't just have a set plan for everybody. That the reason for each person experiencing homelessness is unique to that person. And he did say that there are two different categories that you can you kind of identify which one they belong to, and then that dictates how you work with them. One is that they're they're going through a crisis, which certain circumstances cause them to be in this place where they're at for this moment in time. The other is that their life is a crisis. So recognizing that this is habitual, there are some patterns, there's just everything doesn't work out for them. And so the people that are in a crisis, it might be the same causes for both. One might be mental health, that they switched insurance, they switched jobs, they couldn't get their meds, and so while they were off their meds, things went to poop, and they lost their house, or whatever. Like there are certain things that cause this situation, but mental illness that's not checked or identified, or are serious mental problems, schizophrenia, or some of the more extreme mental illnesses, that everything is always a problem and they can't find a stable spot. So trying to identify which is the case, because you can help by saying, hey, I just need to get through this month, and then other things will break loose. Whereas somebody that's in a crisis, or their life is a crisis, they never break loose. It's always one thing after another. And the other thing that he was saying was that his kind of main example, or biblical example, was the prodigal son. That the father let him go, and it wasn't until he reached the pigsty that that the son realized that how far he had fallen and how much he was in need of help. And so sometimes we have to wait for people that are in crisis or having a crisis to reach that pigsty to where they're ready to receive help. And so you have to let people reach rock bottom, because if they're not ready to ask for help, or to recognize that they could get help, then you're just going to be disappointed and let down time after time. And so that's, people try to help too soon, then they get disappointed, and by the time the person is ready, then they're already exhausted and have lost faith or lost trust in that person. So he was talking through some of those principles of what is our role. So sometimes doing food pantries for homeless people. There are certain ways that food pantries help, but if you're doing it for homeless people, they have a catalog of on this day I get free food here, here, and here, and here, and they can survive. And he was saying, Kansas City, you could never go hungry as a homeless person. You will not die from homelessness or hunger as a homeless person in Kansas City, because there's so many options, food pantries, kitchens, that you can get a free meal from. Trying to give people tents that are in homeless camps, you're enabling them, you're helping them to survive without reaching rock. You're preventing them to get to that bottom pigsty or sleeping bags, that kind of stuff. So some things are, that we think are helping are not. And so those are all things that he was walking us through in response to some of the brainstorms that the church had of how do we show love? Do we open a kitchen? Do we open showers? Do we do this or that? And if we just do it without working with an expert or people that are equipped, then we could be repeating errors when we have that resource on the district already.
So I guess my question is, I know that like the legal stuff is what sort of kicked off a little bit of the tension and everything. In your process, did you look at all at like what some of the ministries for the homeless people do with like liability? Because certainly like they've like got their legal bases covered. Would that be a different process than what a church would do?
Well, I think just having somebody stay on your property, and if something were to happen, that would be a liability. If you knew that they were living there, that they set up a dwelling, that's a different liability than if you were licensed and your purpose is to bring people inside and house. So that's where the liability in those licensing, that kind of stuff differs or separates it. So the shelter that's downstairs or downtown is licensed to house and work with men and receive them, whereas a church building is not. Mm-hmm. And so that's where, whether we just have to pick which lane we're in, and either we go all in or the church defers to the experts.
So having homeless people like on a Sunday morning wasn't necessarily their concern.
No, and those are other issues that we're looking at of, the mentality of the church has been, when homeless people come, is to, as long as they're not in our way, or as long as they come and get Jesus in the service, then that's okay. But if it's outside of that, then what are they doing there? And they had a potluck at one point, and they invited some people in, and they went up for seconds and thirds. And so then then some of the people were upset because, well, they took seconds and thirds. So rude. Or that they piled their plates full. And it's like, well, if you're going to offer somebody who's hungry food, then you can't judge them on how much they eat. Like, they're hungry.
Yeah.
So that was part of the conversation and reactions, that it's like, okay, we want people to come into our church as long as they look like us and smell like us and act like us, and they know those implicit rules and everything else. So.
Are you still attending this church? Or is this something? Yeah. Okay. Stuff.
It's opened up really good conversations, and so I think it is that it did provide a very concrete example of that balance of how do we love, how do we take action through love, but that doesn't always mean that we roll over, or that or sometimes loving isn't giving, loving is not giving. And so it was a really good conversation to have for both sides, to realize that it is both, not or. That we love through relationship, and we love through having rules and structure. And then having a path forward, that this is your path forward. It's not just go away from here. It's these are your options, and we'll help you get there if you want it and if you're ready.